Welcome to True Root Stories that Shape the Narrative. I am so pleased today to have with us Donna Everhart, award-winning Southern fiction writer. I hope I get this right, Donna. Donna is the author of seven books, seven published books, I believe. The Education of Dixie Dupree, The Road to Bittersweet, The Forgiving Kind, The Moonshiner's Daughter, The Saints of Swallow Hill, When the Jessamine Grows, and most recently, hot off the press, Women of a Promiscuous Nature. We have a lot to cover today. We'll see how much we get to in the short time we have. Welcome, Donna.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Well, I am so glad that you're here. So let's just dive right in. For those who don't know you and who do not know your work, can you tell us a little about yourself?
Yes. Well, I always like to start off with just a little bit of the personal side. So I'm married and I have a son and a daughter, and they're full grown, all, out of the house. I have three grandchildren and I have two Yorkie puppies. And they're about to run me ragged. And anybody that knows me has heard me say that more than once. I live in Dunn, North Carolina, so I'm not too far from where I was raised and,
Mhm.
born and raised. And I worked in IT for about 35 years and then got this opportunity, which had been percolating throughout that 25, 35 years. And anyway, I took the plunge, and here I am as new career as an author.
And you are retired, right?
Well, no, I'm not taking anything yet on retirement, so
Okay.
I consider this this is my job now.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. That's good.
it's tempting sometimes, but no.
Okay, so you've talked about your North Carolina roots. You obviously write a lot about Southern and Appalachian history, and I'm assuming that the fact that you were born and reared not far from where you live now played a major role in your decision to write about that part of the country, right?
Absolutely. Um, it goes back to the tried and true saying of write what you know. And I
Hmm.
actually have a kind of an interesting little aside about Lee Smith. Lee Smith was in school, was trying to write, and everybody that, is a Southern writer knows who I'm talking about when I say Lee Smith.
Yeah.
And so there's just this little story. I actually read it in a magazine. I can't recall if it was Garden and Gun or whichever one it was, but she kept writing these stories and she kept getting C's from her professor. And she was writing what she felt like was, what people wanted to read about. And then she
Mhm.
overheard a conversation with her aunt and her mother, and they were talking about getting a hysterectomy. And she wrote about that and she got an A plus. And all of that to
Yeah.
say it goes back to write what you know.
Sure.
So that was what she did, and that's what I feel like I'm doing. Is I was, born here, Southern roots, so this is what I feel like I know.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was born and reared in the South as well, although I lived up north for a while. And there's just something special about the South from a literary standpoint. I can't
Yeah,
quite put my
no,
finger on
I
it,
know
but
exactly. That's not the first time that has been brought up. It's almost like people can't quite pinpoint it.
yeah, sure.
And it goes back again to another story of another famous Southern writer, Harper Lee. She was asked this
Mm.
question about, what is it about the South? And I believe her answer involved something about the North being more industrialized and the South was more agricultural. And what I took from that, my interpretation was simply the fact that we rely on Mother Nature, literally, you know, Mother Nature for our well being, because a lot of people were growing their crops and trying to make money from that. Whereas
Mhm.
up north, it's more, like I said, industrialized. You could get a check regularly every week if you worked in a factory. So, you
Yeah.
know, I don't know. I mean, that's just a very small pocket of what it is to be in the South and to be Southern and to think about the Southern culture. That's just a very, very small piece of that pie.
Yeah, I think there's also a factor, especially when you talk about things like Southern Gothic. The South historically experienced a degree of trauma that the North didn't experience.
Yes, I think so. And my book, The Education of Dixie Dupree, is the kitchen sink of family dysfunction and and
Yeah,
trauma. You
yeah.
know, the reality is there for many people. I don't know why, this would be any different from anybody else anywhere else. But I think, for the country in general, the South was really kind of epitomized in the movie Steel Magnolias.
Hmm.
There's just all of that, that was going on within that particular family and just the way things got handled. And I'm always very kind of, I don't know if I want to say reluctant or hesitant to downplay any other region in the country and what they may, have experienced. I don't know. I mean, to me, a lot of what it is about being in the South and being Southern and writing stories from that perspective have a lot to do with just the setting. I mean,
Sure.
we're in this environment where front porch sitting is a big part of our life.
Yeah.
You know,
Unfortunately, it
there
used to be a lot bigger part than it is now.
Yes. Oh, yes, exactly. And I mean, it's our mannerisms, it's our way of speech, it's so many different things all folded together. And again, every region has got that for themselves, but there's just something
Yeah.
there about the South, that seems to draw people in. And I sometimes want to say it's the softness of, the soft side of the South that
Mm.
brings people in.
Yeah, that's interesting. One of the things that I really admire so much about your work is your keen sense of voice.
Thank you. I
Yeah.
appreciate that. Yeah,
And
thanks.
I'm sure a lot of that derives from the fact that you grew up, right,
Absolutely.
smack dab in the middle of all of that. So, when you decide to write a novel, what is your inspiration? Does it come from a character that shows up inside of you that speaks to you and says, "Hey, you need to write about me," or is it some historical spark that, you know, elicits your interest, or is it something else? What inspires you to write a new book?
It's that's I love that question. I know, I got a chance to look at some of the questions ahead of time and I really like that one. Because really it's been all of that.
Uh-huh.
So, it's interesting. In the beginning for me, like with the education of Dixie Dupree, it was her voice. Sometimes a voice I feel like will jump in your head and there it is. And I just had this strong, strong sense. Now, granted, I was heavily influenced by the writing of Kay Gibbons and her book Ellen Foster and Dorothy Allison Bastard out of Carolina. Those
Hmm.
were two heavy influences on my writing in the earlier days.
Hmm.
And so I knew the voice was going to be critical and key. Um, and then with the road to bittersweet, Wallace Ann, my main character in that story, has got a very distinctive Appalachian tone. And the writers that influenced me, or a writer in particular that really influenced me, was Robert Morgan
Hmm.
and his book Gap Creek. But so, the story spark comes from voice. It comes from a historical event. I mean, a lot of times that's going to be my launching pad for something.
Hmm.
In The Forgiving Kind, which was my third book, I mean, to be honest with you, I was interested in cotton and how they grew cotton. And I sort of envied people that grew up on farms. Didn't have to be a
Right.
cotton farm, could be tobacco farm, corn,
Sure.
soybean, whatever's being grown out there. And I live in an area where I'm actually like right in town in Dunn, so in a neighborhood, but I can go half a mile down the road and there's cotton fields everywhere.
Right.
And so I just became fascinated with that. So it comes from all of those things, the interest in a particular part of our culture, some historical event, and sometimes the voice is there and sometimes I have to work at it.
So that's interesting. Did you spend time in the cotton fields just to immerse yourself to,
You know,
to get a
okay,
feel
so
for it? Or
I actually had somebody, several people write to me after the Forgiving. Oh, you nailed it. Did you
yeah,
grow up on a cotton farm?
yeah,
No.
yeah,
But I didn't spend time in a cotton, but I did a lot of research
yeah.
and I rode around a lot
Hmm.
filming cotton. And I'll tell you something that people I don't think know if you're not around it where you can see it being grown, I don't think anybody has any idea how beautiful
Hmm.
the crop is,
Yeah,
especially in the early stages, because it goes through this period where the leaves are this absolutely deep, deep green and the blooms of flowers pop out. And there's a pollination that, they self pollinate and turn from this beautiful buttery cream color to this deep sort of fuchsia burgundy. A cotton field is absolutely beautiful when it's transitioning. And then, of course, it goes through the major transition and the pods, pop open and you have cotton.
right.
So, yeah, it was, it's just, you can tell I kind of get off on to the whole crop thing, but I
Well,
love
that's
it,
good.
I wish I
Yeah,
had grown up on a farm.
and I love the fact that your writing is undergirded, if you will, by deep research.
It
That's
is.
that's important. Um, so let's just talk about Appalachia a little bit because several of your books are rooted in Appalachia, and I'll actually put myself in this category. I think most people have, I'll call it sort of a flattened or a distorted, cliched, stereotypical view of Appalachia.
Yeah.
And I'm curious as to, the importance to you of disabusing your readers of that notion and how you go about creating a sense on the part of the readers of what Appalachia truly is, so you disabuse them of those preconceived notions that they have.
When I write these particular books, I am extra cautious because I don't come from there.
Yeah,
I've spent a lot of time there, but to grow up and live there is a whole other thing.
sure.
And so those are the books that make me the most nervous to write because I don't want to misrepresent them. And to answer the question about how they get portrayed, or, and it's particularly, more so, I think, decades ago. And there's probably still some of it, I'm sure, out there today. But I am not interested in trying to portray a Lil Abner type
Right.
of situation or a Beverly Hillbillies.
Yeah.
I saw a segment on TV. It's been a while back, and probably on Channel 4 or something. I'm not sure, but it actually was talking about how there was this almost sense of buffoonery
Hmm.
that they would apply to the people from the mountains. And they did that through these cartoons, these early cartoons that were coming out.
Sure.
And again, I'm thinking, like of Lil Abner and characters like
Sure.
that. And, the whole moonshine thing, and it was always a jug, and, the person would have the crisscross, in their eyes, and
Yeah.
like a bunch of drunkards and that kind of thing. And what I found out, for instance, like as I was researching for The Moonshiner's Daughter, is that it was very rare that they were producing it to sell it, not to drink it.
Mm.
And they were supplementing their income. And that was important to me to make sure that I included something without, looking like I'm going off on the deep end. But it was important for me to convey that because a lot of those who distilled the white lightning and or shine, whatever you want to call it,
Hmm.
they did not drink it. They literally created it to sell, to
Yeah,
help
that's
supplement
interesting.
their income.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Finding that fine line when you're writing historical fiction, it's important to capture that regional sense of voice. Otherwise, your fiction's going to fall flat.
Mm,
But at the same time, you can't caricature it,
that's right.
And so
And
finding that balance can be tricky.
absolutely. And I'll say this, and this was another question that I loved. Because I just learned something. And now, I say I learned it because I did it in The Road to Bittersweet. I chose probably a handful of certain words that Wallace Sand would say and that her family members would say, just a particular part of their colloquial speech.
Hmm.
And I used that and I tried not to get crazy with it. So recently, it just so happens that my work in progress is once again set back up in the mountains. And for that particular pocket in the Blue Ridge, there was a word that was used, and it was used heavily, but it gets lost in the writing. And so I went back and forth with another writer friend. As a matter of fact, it's Leah Weiss,
Hmm.
who, wrote If the Creek Don't Rise, All the
Right.
Little Hopes, and she's got a third book coming out in March called The Creek, the Crone, and the Crow. But she and I kind of had a back and forth on what I was doing. And I told her when I would read this to myself, I would lose this one little word, and it's you, YOU, but I was using it as YE because that was actually historically accurate.
Right.
And I ended up taking that out. I took it out because if I'm in front of at an event and I'm reading from the book, you wouldn't know it. I mean,
Yeah.
I could have tried to focus on it, but then it would have seemed like stiff or maybe not natural
Yep.
speech.
Yep.
So that's what you do. You try not to get too heavy-handed with it and you pick something. You pick a couple, three phrases, and
Yeah.
that's what you try to use.
Yeah. That's a really good point. I mean, the book I'm working on right now, in the book, there is a secondary character who stutters.
Yeah,
And I'm a member of a writing critique group, and they help me in ways that I can't even begin to describe. But they're helping me work through the extent to which I convey that aspect of this individual without overdoing it.
exactly.
And it's a real challenge sometimes.
I
Anyway,
think something you might want to consider, Mike, not to use our time here to give writing
yeah.
advice, but what I have learned is that some people who stutter, it's triggered by something,
Hmm.
nervousness. So if your character's not always nervous, then the character can speak naturally.
Yeah.
But if you put them in a high octane type of moment where they would be nervous, then it can come out.
Yeah. Yeah,
Consider that.
that's a good point. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's talk a little about your writing style, your writing methodology. What does a typical writing day look like for you? I mean, this is a full-time job for you now,
Yeah.
right? So what does a writing day look like for you?
Oh gosh. Well, lately it's been a hair pulling exercise. Okay. So I will say this. When you come off of writing a book like Women of a Promiscuous Nature, which is such an, I feel like, an important book, to step into the next work in progress has been very challenging for me, very challenging. And I feel like it's because it doesn't rise up to the equivalence of that book. And so I have really struggled. So for me, my writing day, I'm doing it all the time. Now I
Mhm.
have two dogs that need to go outside. They're still very
Right.
young. They're about 20, they're going to be 20 months old. They're not even 2 years old. They're Yorkies.
Right.
They're high energy. They're all over the place.
Yeah.
So thank goodness for them because they get me away from my desk and I go outside. Otherwise, I would sit there for probably 12 to 14 hours. And it took me 3 years to get these dogs, and I think I actually did have some days like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So at 3 years between losing my last one and getting these. So my typical writing day is I try to get some time in the morning somewhere. It's going to be depending on when I walk them and all that. It's going to be anywhere between say, 9 and 12, a couple hours. And there's always at least a couple of hours in the afternoon. So I break it up, but I will go in, come into this office late at night, and after I'm, supposedly telling my husband I'm going to go to bed, he'll stay up and watch a little more TV. And
Yeah.
sometimes I'll come in here and get another hour in. Um, and so that's how it is. It's kind of broken up, but it's throughout the day. And I'm
Yeah.
always writing in my head anyway. I'm always thinking about, okay, I've got this plot dilemma, and I'm out there in the yard with the dogs, and I'm staring into space.
How
So that's
often,
kind of it for me.
yeah, in the course of writing a book, how often are you surprised by the direction that it takes?
Well, I'll say this with this one a lot. I have killed a character off, I've brought him back, I've killed him off,
Yeah.
and I've brought him back.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm constantly surprised with every one, every single one. There's always going to be something. And it's either going to be, where I was expecting a story to go, or and then it goes where I didn't expect it to go. And that's a very high level way of thinking about it or trying to convey it. But it's true, you know. This character that I killed off and brought back a couple of times, I did that because I like the character. He's kind of the reader's probably not going to like him very much, and he's kind of one of those unlikable characters, but he's a very interesting character, and I think he adds something. So I kept bringing him back. And that
Yeah.
was kind of surprising because I was actually relieved when I got rid of him. And then I was like thinking the story was missing something.
Yeah.
So I brought him
It's
back.
interesting. Every character, whether it's a protagonist, an antagonist, secondary characters, every character is a real human being with real feelings, real emotions, real motivations, in
Yep.
need of something. And whether you particularly like them or not, they're still real people.
That's right. That's right. I had
Yeah.
somebody ask me one time, well, how do you create your characters? And I told him, I said, it's a little bit, I feel like Frankenstein, Dr. Frankenstein,
Yeah.
because I just sort of cobble them together with bits and pieces of things that I've either witnessed or that I'm aware of or other people in my life. That t-shirt that everybody, likes to wear if they're a writer, be careful, you could be in my next book.
Yeah,
you
right.
know.
So, yeah, so just focus on characters for a minute. And then I do want to, in the limited time we have, talk about your two most recent books. But Joetta McBride,
Yes.
is she still living inside of you?
I loved writing her character. I absolutely did. She was a
Yeah.
hard character to write. At one point in the story, I think it was around chapter 6, yet again, another writer friend of mine um, said, I told her, I said, I don't know what I'm going to do with her. I said, because she's in a very, very rural North Carolina back during the Civil War was vastly rural.
Hmm.
85% of the state was nothing but woods and farmland.
Hmm.
And I said, I mean, I can't, I said, what is she going to do? She's out in the field all day. I can't
Yeah.
write this 300 and something page book and she's only in there ever in the fields,
Yeah.
you know? So yeah, so but she has stuck with me because I had to get her out of the field. And once I got her out of the field, things started to kind of happen.
Yeah.
And I just thought about, well, what would women back then do?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
especially during the wartime, there was a lot of volunteer efforts, to wrap linens, for bandaging and the sewing, for the socks. I mean, they had to sew
Sure.
all of their clothing. So
Yeah.
I finally, just did more research and just really looked at the lifestyle. I read a lot of letters, like out on Encypedia,
Hmm.
North Carolina, like the online North Carolina encyclopedia that's got a lot of great, if you're a writer, material for research. And so I read a lot of letters, and some of those sparked some of the ideas that I included in the book.
Yeah, that's good. So let's
Yeah.
focus on when the Jessamine grows a little bit, since we're going to be running out of time here. Could you just, for those viewers who have not read it, tell us a little bit about that book without giving anything away?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yep, I can.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the main thing I think that's so important about When the Jessamine Grows is that it's not a story about the war. It's
Mhm.
set during the Civil War, but it's not about the war. Now, there's historic events that take place within the book that help drive the narrative, but it's truly a story of a woman who gets left behind, and she is the sole person that is responsible for keeping the farm running, keeping food on the table, and keeping her family together. And the thing with Joetta McBride and her family is they were trying to stay neutral, which is a
Yeah.
highly unusual and a very tenuous position to be able to try to take in the Civil War. Some people felt like, well, that's just impossible. She had to take a side one way or the other. And I felt like, no, she didn't, because she's, again, stuck out there in the middle of nowhere. She is almost like she's got blinders on and she's just working in the fields and she's just trying to keep her family together.
Yeah, I spent a lot of time in North Georgia,
Yeah,
and this whole idea of Joetta not believing that that war was theirs to fight.
yeah,
There was a lot of that same belief in North Georgia.
absolutely. And I found accounts of that, which is why I wrote it.
Yeah.
Because I thought this is if I'm going to write a Civil War book, and I really kind of stayed away from that. I thought everybody's done that, a lot of, or
Yeah.
at least a lot of people have done that. Not everybody, but a lot. And I just thought, well, what can I add to it? And I happened to run across the neutrality point. I mean, as a matter of fact, Charles Frazier, there was a hint of that in his book. And then another wonderful writer who recently passed away about a year or so ago, Paulette Giles. Her books are centered a lot around that time frame, or maybe just after that, when they were going through the rebuilding of the South and whatnot. And her book, Enemy Women, actually has that at the very beginning, where her main character is calling out, but we're neutral. We're neutral. And
Right.
if you think about it, some of the border states, I
Hmm.
mean, that's what they were. They were neutral. They weren't diving in yet. So
Yeah.
that's at the macro level. But then you get down into the individual, and you probably don't have a lot of historic accounts about that because nobody was going to talk about it. You could
No.
get strung up, from a tree or put into prison for that kind of belief. You would have been believed
Yes.
as a traitor.
There were a lot of people in rural, up in the mountains of North Georgia who actually fought for the Union Army, and a lot
Hmm.
of them got strung up on from
Yeah.
trees
Yeah.
because
Well,
of,
think about this. You had families that actually had married somebody from the north and vice versa. And then this war takes place.
yeah,
What I mean, this again, it was the war between fathers and sons and brothers and
yeah.
brothers. So it ended up being, for me, just, I learned a lot, I did. And I'm very proud of that book, because I felt like the most complicated thing to do would be to have her adhere to that and not cave. And I thought, I don't want to write about her being in a prison,
Yeah, exactly.
And if
So
she
can
was
you talk?
dead, my book would be very short.
Yeah, exactly. Can you talk about Henry a little bit?
Well, that's kind of the big question, right? And
Yeah.
so,
So you
without
don't want to
giving
talk
anything
about Henry much.
away, yeah,
Yeah.
without giving anything
Yeah, I
away,
don't want you to
there
give
was a
anything
lot of
away.
there was a lot of question about that.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, we won't go there.
yeah,
We won't go there. Okay, so women of a promiscuous nature.
yes. I have the
Let's
book here
let's
so I
talk
can
about that
hold
a
it
little
up.
bit. I'm sorry?
I said I have the book here so I can hold it up.
Very good.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to reading it. So can you talk about it a little bit because it is hot off the press, if you will?
Yeah. Well, it releases January 27th. It's getting some very good reviews. The story is actually a shocking history. And when I stumbled across this, and it was through a series of events, like, you're an author, you know how this happens. You find out one thing, the next thing you know is the proverbial domino effect, boom, boom, boom.
Hmm.
And what led me to this particular topic of a mass incarceration of women without due process from about it started actually over in Europe in about 1860s or so, but it came over here and got started around World War One. Um, but what started that for me was the word prostitution, if you can believe it.
Mm.
And once I looked that up, I found out that there was this law enacted by Congress called the Chamberlain-Conn Act. And the Chamberlain-Conn Act allowed the military, local police, like local law officials, and local community officials to be able to scrutinize women. And if they were suspected of carrying a sexually transmitted infection, rounding them up, forcing them to undergo exams, and then putting them away in these various detention facilities. Like here in North Carolina, not too far from me, in Kinston, North Carolina, was the State Industrial Farm Colony for women. And that's where a good chunk of this story takes place.
Wow.
And so it
Wow.
started in World War One, and then when we were thinking about getting into World War Two, uh, they resurrected this law again. It was always there, kind of in the background. The scrutiny was always there, but that's essentially what it's about. It's told from the perspective of three different individuals, and I chose these particular people, these characters, very intentionally. So one is Stella Temple. She's 15. You could consider her an innocent, and through no fault of her own, she ends up pregnant and her parents send her off. And that happened to a lot of young women, young
Hmm.
girls. They were being sent off to be reformed and redeemed.
Yeah.
And then you have Ruth Foster, who is a young woman who is living outside the bounds of what society might consider the right trajectory for her. And that is, she's living alone and working a job. And so she's heavily scrutinized, picked up one day by the local sheriff, undergoes an invasive exam, and shipped off to the colony. And then I have Dorothy Baker, who's the superintendent at the facility, who gives another completely different perspective. She truly believes that she's helping these young women. So, all three of those characters, amongst a whole bunch of other characters, tell the story about these women who were locked up without due process. And it lasted actually until around the 1950s, if
Wow.
you can imagine it. And a lot of people haven't heard about this. That's what's made this book become so critical. The two comp titles that are used against it are The Handmaid's Tale and Girl Interrupted. But The
Hmm.
Handmaid's Tale,
Hmm.
one of the little promotional materials says, if The Handmaid's Tale were a true story, it would be women of a promiscuous nature. Because
Interesting.
most of what I have in here, while it's a brutal, hard read, um, it actually took place.
Yeah, it is a true story.
Yeah,
Um, yeah. Yeah. So the book is told through those three characters' POVs.
yep, exactly.
I'm just interested in the mechanics. Or do you devote respective chapters to each of them and
Exactly.
tell through their POVs?
Yes,
And are they in
exactly.
third person or first person or
They're
a
in third
mix?
person,
They're in third person.
close third person.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, there's a little bit of, there may be a little touch here and there of the omniscient voice, but it's mostly close third person, third person. Um, and, I actually dabbled with a first person. This is the thing you do, in the beginning of writing the book.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I actually tried some of that out. And I think, it's kind of interesting because my first four books were written from the first person perspective. And now these next three books have been written from third person.
Hmm.
And to go back to first person, I almost feel like I'm in my head too much or something.
Oh, that's
It's like,
interesting.
well, Donna, how did you do that?
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
don't know, but I did try it out with a couple of the characters here, and it just felt better to me to keep it all in third person.
Yeah. I struggle with omniscience because when a reader reads a book, I want the reader to I want the characters to live inside the reader, and I want the reader to immerse him or herself in such a way that he or she is not aware that there is an author. And the
Right.
minute you start
Exactly.
slipping into omniscience, the reader becomes immediately aware
Yeah.
that there's an author.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. And that's true. And I wished I could pinpoint something here that I could read quickly, but no way. And we don't have enough time for that. But,
yeah,
you know, and that is true. I think if you're careful with it, you can sort of convey just like a little quick,
yeah,
but she did not know that whatever, what I'm saying.
right.
And then you just move out of it
Yeah,
again, if
yeah.
that makes sense.
No, it does make sense. Yeah. Um, okay, so we are running out of time. I always get so frustrated with these interviews because we don't have enough time to cover everything that I'd like to cover, but it is the way it is. So, a couple of things as we wrap up here. Is there anything that we have not touched on that you would like to touch on?
Yes, a couple things actually. When is this? Well, first of all, I know you probably, I think you're shooting for this interview coming out in during this month.
Mhm.
Um, One of the two things I wanted to mention, two accolades for women of a promiscuous nature, and you may have seen this on my social media, Mike, but it's a Library Reads Top 10 pick for
Yes.
January. And
Yes.
this was supposed to be announced today, and I haven't seen anything yet, but I'm going to assume it's okay to let everybody know that it's also an Indie Next pick for February
That's
2026.
excellent.
So those are two big deals, and I was absolutely thrilled. I haven't had an Indie Next pick since my debut came out almost 10 years ago. So
Yeah.
I was absolutely thrilled that the book is getting that kind of recognition. So those are a couple of things I wanted to mention.
Yeah, that's wonderful. So, how can viewers learn more about you? Where can they buy your books? I mean, I know your books are all over the place, but yeah. So, how can they
Yeah.
learn more about you? And
Yeah, absolutely. So the best way to reach out to me, and all of my social media links are out there on donnaeverhart.com. And one thing that I would really love for viewers to do, followers, whatever, if they visit me out there, also know that I'm out on Instagram. You'll see the little icons in the top corner of my webpage. So
Mhm.
you can connect with me there. And I've just started doing TikTok videos because I do this thing called First Sentence Fridays when I'm introducing a new book. Now we're almost at the tail end of me introducing this one. It's got
Yeah.
35 chapters, and this coming Friday is chapter 33. But I give away a free advanced reader copy every single week
Oh, that's great.
to somebody that answers my weekly question. I
Yeah.
ask a weekly question along with introducing the first sentence of each chapter. So just come to donnaeverhart.com and you can go to my blog and you can learn all about it.
That is wonderful. Donna, this has been so delightful. I really appreciate your time today.
Thank you for having me. I've
Um,
thoroughly enjoyed talking to you. You made it seem so easy. I could talk to you all day.
Well, I love doing these, and I look forward to reading your new book.
Thank
And
you.
yeah, so you have a great day and Happy New Year, by the way.
Thank you, and Happy New Year to you and everybody.
Very good. Take care.